football. To start with, I'd like the panel to introduce themselves, their role, where they're from, and tell me something that you would like to tell your younger self.
Hello, my name is Ray Dower. I'm the current Football Australia Technical Director for Women's Football and the current head coach of our Junior Matildas, which is our national under-17 women's team. What would I tell my younger self? I would tell my younger self to keep persisting and keep persisting and keep persisting, and that one day the genie will be out of the bottle, which is like I think it is now, and it's not going back. So the persistence, I think, has paid off after 47 years.
Hi, I'm John Nauright. I'm a professor here on occasion for the University of Sydney, and I'm running the Smashed Research Group, coordinating that. We're trying to make social impact with the research that we're doing. We have a grant project at the moment on incorporating Aboriginal movement cultures into the physical education curriculum, which is very exciting. So I'm enjoying that. What I would tell my younger self is the quality of the university in which you work does matter. And so focus on getting yourself into Group of 8, Russell Group, top tier universities, and stay there.
Thank you.
For how long?
My name is Louise McColl. I'm the Community Technical Lead at Football Australia. It's been a job that I've had only recently from this year, March onwards. Previous to that, I still live in regional Victoria. I'm in Bendigo, and I was the technical director of the representative squads there, which included looking after a group of 12 coaches, mostly male coaches at that point, but we are starting to build the female quota there as well in Bendigo. And I am looking at how we can get more people on board in football, especially coaches, and then keep them in the game. So it's one thing to get them, it's another thing to keep them and support them further through the coaching, I'm not going to say careers, but coaching pathways that they are on, and wherever that is that they want to be. So not everybody wants to keep, say, going up towards that high performance level, but they are working within their community. So keeping them there, doing the right things. What would I tell my younger self when questions are thrown at you like this and I don't have time to think? Yes, there's many things if we keep it to football related. Similar to what Ray said, I think it would be you will be able to have a career in this sport, which is something that I would have never really thought was going to be something that I could do back then.
I'm Andrei Markovits, professor at the University of Michigan. It seems like I've been on every second panel, fourth panel here, so I think you already met me. I would tell my younger self to life is going to go very fast, and even faster than I thought. Enjoy it more than I do. And I certainly, I can't believe, listen to this guy, sending for something. It's go to research universities. I would not say a word about any universities to my younger self.
So I was being a bit strategic there, that question, because I think reflection is really important to grow and to develop, and that's where I sort of wanted to take the start of this panel and the conversation is, what reflections do you have on the development of women's football that we can take into the future?
Oh, okay. Well, I actually, have a little handout which, I circulated. And, to me, I think the key, to, what we discussed these 2 amazing days, is about, the linkage to fandom. And, it's all about the degree of fandom which will propel this game further, or, I mean, as you rightly said, the genie's out of the bottle. Of course, it's, as I said in my earlier panel this afternoon, or whatever, it's absolutely tremendous where this game has come to in this tournament. It's unbelievable. But it seems to me that on the fan level, and how that wonderful panel about what the young girl spoke with her friends, and you know, they typically maybe 40% was about sports. I doubt it, probably was 10% about sports. Is really where the key lies. And so, and I'll make this very short because there really are degrees of fandom, like in concentric circles, and I see them as following. The first one is awareness, that you have to be aware of something, which is women's football has attained that totally. I mean, unless you live in some cage or something, whatever, you go to a cave, you know, that there's this event. The next one is attraction, which I think it also has. The next one is allegiance. And that is already more of an issue because it's allegiance on the national level, but we talked a lot about this conference, that it's about really the club level where cultures are created, where really lastingness develops. Allegiance, the next one is attachment, which is crucial. And there, I mean, all my research showed that women's sports are not even close to what men's sports are in terms of being attached to Manchester, whatever, a team, really attached. And then I actually have a last one, which I added later in my research, what I call addiction affliction. And this is the sports omnivores. It's the Andy Markovits, meaning which women are not into this, and maybe they shouldn't be. This is all debatable whether this is valuable. What I mean by this is that to someone like me and others of this ilk, it's actually all about pain. To be a real fan is all about pain. You worry constantly. You win a championship and you already are worried about whom do you trade, what do you do, what's in the market, whatever. It's a constant form of worry. It's a constant form of it, and it's really addictive. It's, as my wife says, you're actually not interested in the game per se. You're interested in between the game. You know, you follow radio, you follow the internet, who is trading what, and this is sort of this is what I would call dense fandom. Again, whether this is desirable or not, but I just wanted this as a conference, I have to mention it. So this is the degree of fandom, I would say that is typical of the established male world. Okay? This degree. I mean, all 5 of them. Clearly, the further you go, the fewer there are. So the awareness level is massive. The addiction affliction level is not massive. Or so we think. And then I thought, when I developed this Sportistas, the field of fandom. And here there are 2 sort of axes. What do we mean by fandom? On the y-axis, it's the affect. It's whether you like something. And by the way, there's nothing to do with sports. I mean, do you like Taylor Swift? Do you like it? I mean, the fandom is clearly a form of affect or a form of emotion. And on the y-axis, there is the other dimension, which is that of, if you want, the first one is more that of the heart. The one on the axis one is the other one is of the head. What do you know about it? Okay. It's a knowledge interpretation dimension. It's an intellect dimension. And that's also very important with fandom. So this leads to a fourfold quadrant, and then I stop. At the bottom is, of course, the non-fan, obviously, of which, you know, surprise, surprise to someone like me that such humans even exist, but they're millions and billions, or just not fans, and they're neither are you know, they don't have, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, this, oh, it's important. Yeah. Okay, so the non-fan, obviously, you know, who doesn't care about this, it just doesn't exist. This world does not exist, it knows nothing. Okay. Then I call the one that is all about the heart, enthusiastic dilettante. Okay. Meaning you love the Yankees, or you love a team, or and this is very high, obviously, on the level of national football. The main thing about being a Matilda fan at the moment is all about your feelings. You don't necessarily know all the players, you don't know the strategy, you don't know why this particular player should be really playing much more inside right and more defensive holder rather than this. That's not what matters. You are for the Matildas because you love them and you want them to win. However, for it to be lasting, you also have to go at least some level on the x-axis. There is some level of knowledge important here. Now, I call the one that is only about knowledge the hardened technocrat. Some people love this category. Okay? Someone actually only knows about numbers, only knows about strategy, but doesn't have any feeling, is certainly a fan, but, you know, anyway, it's a category. And lastly, the ideal, or the one that is the super fan, knows both. In other words, has feelings, loves the whatever it is, but also knows about this, is well versed, knows the strategies, whatever. And the more that is the case, that's what I call it again the sportistas. And in this case, these are these choice female journalists, of 50 of them, who really are completely conversant in knowledge, but also are completely involved in terms of their affect. And it seems to me that it's in that level that the next 20, 30 years, women's football, this is where the game will be played. This is where will it be successful? What will last? How long will it, what does it really mean that we discussed here? Is it a temporary thing, or is it lasting? And it's clearly, the enthusiasm cannot be lasting. For that, you need a certain form of knowledge, a certain form of expertise. So it may not be perfect, but it has to be at least in the middle of the graph. Okay, enough.
Thank you. And I have to follow that. What was the question?
Yeah, it was a question.
I'm sorry, I took this seriously.
I was listening so closely, I forgot that I had to speak next. So yeah, thank you. All right, reflection on women's football.
Football, yeah, that we can take forward.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I guess for me, the reflection that we take forward is the perception that now you can start playing the game and be able to be part of something and feel like you can identify as a footballer, as a female. So or anybody can now be a footballer. So I think we talked earlier, there was one of the early panels very early on, I'm not sure what time, we talked about wanting to see girls go home and play in the garden or with a sock or a balloon. And I guess for me, that was me. I see a sock, kick it around, annoy my parents probably. And most of my friends were boys, but we would play till dark, till the parents shouted us in, and then we'd try and get a little bit longer before we got into trouble. However, once I started high school in England, I was told you can't play anymore. And so I think that removed who I was at the time. So to be so into something and all of my, I guess, everything I did involved playing, to then be told you can't play anymore was like, oh, who am I now without this? Or what happens, someone tell you you're not allowed to do something that you want to do. So for me, to be brief, that doesn't have like that shouldn't happen now, and it hopefully won't happen now. When I see the young players, you know, from when they start playing and they turn 11, 12, I'm really excited for them to think that they have a journey now in front of them. And no matter where, I'm not saying that they go on to play for national teams, but they can stay involved in sport and be part of it and accepted. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that the future is, and the reflection is that now it's accepted that that's okay. And yeah, I'm
Do you think that today you would have, when you go home and when you played with the boys, today you would be playing with the girls?
not yet. I don't think we've got to that yet. I think there's still, that would be still a sort of male dominated area where that happens. But I think it's definitely becoming more acceptable that that would be an okay thing to do, which maybe it hasn't always been the case.
Can you imagine a girl, sorry, because I find it so important, but can you imagine when you go to, you know, Susie would really, and then Karen, whatever, would have actually really liked to have come out with me and, you know, we could play one-on-one or whatever, or was this totally crazy?
When I was younger,
Yes, exactly.
no, I mean the people that played were boys at the time. Yeah, but I believe now I see girls at the school playground joining in, which wasn't the case. So I do believe that it's becoming okay or accepted by, and maybe it's not accepted by the kids, but it's accepted by the generation above them, that it's okay for their daughter to kick a sock around the house and pretend it's football. That's okay.
I hear a lot of women tell me,
Turn it on.
a lot of women have told me that in terms of male dominated sports, they're not just football, but you know, they hear comments, it's not a sport for me. It's girls don't play that sport. The women's game is not as good, that they have to deal with those kind of comments from their peers, and there's this I think sometimes unconscious gender bias that that society still hold. And so do you still find that? How do you, what can we learn from that? What do we need to?
I think, and I don't know if this answers it or not, but if you allow us, I'm going to say this, because of the game, if you allow us to be athletes, then the game is good. And so in the past, that's not been the case. So yeah, it looked a bit slower, because at the end of the day, the people are working and they're trying to play in their hobby time as it was. But now, and I think I was talking to Ray earlier, my son, who's nearly 19, walked past the TV the other night, likes the game. He's been watching some of the World Cup, and he just stood watching the TV, and it was the Germany game, I believe. And he's like, wow, this is good. And I was like, yeah, yes, it is. And so because we're allowed to be athletes now and actually spend the time getting better, then of course it's going to get better. And so that's to see how far that goes is going to be really interesting to see. So yeah, allow us to do it as a profession, and yeah, it's going to be.
How did your girlfriends feel about you when you played with the boys?
And mostly my friends were boys, I think, but yeah, it sounds.
But were you seen as sort of an outlier, or was it?
I didn't think so. I thought I was popular at the time.
No, not with the boys. You were probably,
yeah.
But the girls you were probably.
No, yeah.
Okay.
In primary school, got a bit shy in high school, didn't know who I was anymore, but.
So you were not seen as odd. You weren't kind of. You know,
didn't think so.
no.
I didn't. I was. Guess that. Yeah, I didn't feel. I felt included until I was told I couldn't play. I think that's.
Would you say that you had the supportive social structure and environment around you that supported your participation to continue and to maintain that? Whereas I think there's a lot of girls who don't have that supportive structure around them, and we talk about you know, when fathers get involved
and their daughters and they become allies. What about sons? Like, you know, we should be influencing the boys because they're the future men and the future generation that,
And that's maybe a later question or the debate, but I mostly coach boys, and so that's something that I believe they see you as a coach and not a male female coach, and that's influence, like you just said, that's the next generation. So it's not strange for them. That's just how it is, and as long as you do the job well and you support them, I think that's how it needs to be. I feel like I've had all the questions.
Well, it's interesting what you say, we have to ask.
I'm excited because I put together the program hoping it would work, that it would mostly go to time, and that we would cover important issues. And I think two things really speak out to me from what I've heard throughout the last 2 days. One is that there are still tremendous obstacles to overcome. At the same time, there's tremendous opportunity and changes that are taking place literally right in front of us. In the last 3 to 5 years, there's just been this acceleration, particularly coming out of COVID. The Women's Rugby World Cup, most watched ever, most exciting. The final was insane. A couple of us were out there. This Women's World Cup has sold the most tickets ever, highest rating. The Matildas obliterated the Ashes test the other night in ratings. And I'm not saying that men's sport should suffer for women's sport to succeed, but we are seeing some changes. I started writing about women in sport in the 1990s. And, you know, as women were coming into soccer and football and rugby in particular, sports that were traditionally seen as masculine, there was a lot of either vilification of women because they were too masculine or too muscular, or an attempt to find the most sexy athletes. And, you know, we know from the history of the Matildas that, you know, the way in which the Matildas had to present themselves in the 1990s is very different today. So I think we should take those points and celebrate them, because it's significant that you see people who look like me succeeding in the media, in the public sphere, so that when you see Sam Kerr, she represents something you can relate to. When you see Ellie Carpenter, you can relate to her. When you see the other women on the Matildas, you can relate to them. Challenges still remain, and one of the things that I am concerned about is the direction of investment, particularly as venture capital is coming into funding sports all over the world. And there are so many people looking for places to invest in sport, which is on the one hand is a good thing. But on the other hand, they're not interested in the success of the sport or the product per se, but in a return on investment. And that can lead to things that take the game away from what we see as valuable in women's football. There are positive models and positive things I see. Angel FC, we've talked about several times in this conference. A second one is Michelle Kang has just taken her ownership in Washington Spirit, and for the first time has bought majority stake in a separated entity as Olympique Lyonnais Féminin is now a separate entity in terms of its financial structure to OL and the men's team. And Olympique Lyonnais has really been one of the drivers, I think, of investment in football by clubs that perhaps have a bigger global reach, like, you know, Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, Chelsea, Arsenal, and the Manchesters. You know, those kinds of clubs where players are going. At the same time, and I'm going to just finish this off and pass it to Ray since she's directly involved in this. There is a concern of how then we take these international opportunities, these high-level opportunities, and create player pathways through the system, through the junior level up to the Matildas level, the A-Leagues level, knowing that many of the top players will go overseas, how to keep that infrastructure going and that development going in a positive direction. Last comment I would say, it is absolutely important, I think, from a couple of sessions where we've discussed this, that safeguarding mental health and well-being are built into the structures of football organization at every level. That includes the coaches, the administrators, the players, that it has to be a fundamental part of the football ecosystem.
The question again, where we come from, something like that, where we're going, something like that. Look, if I think the first women's football game in Australia happened in 1921 in Brisbane. So if I think about 1976 in Brisbane, I was 6, I couldn't play the game. As a 7-year-old, the first under 14 girls competition came around. As a 7-year-old, I played an under 14 girls. Now, obviously we wouldn't allow that now, okay? Disparity, etc., etc. We wouldn't allow that. But that was my introduction to play the game. So what I would say is, what kept me hanging around a lot for that whole 12 months that I wasn't allowed to play was my brother's coach. Because I went down with my brother to play, but I was a year older than him. Girls weren't allowed to play with boys, so I couldn't play. But he allowed me to train with them twice a week. So I didn't come from a football family. It was just my brother and I had a lot of energy. My mum and dad wanted to expend that energy. So that's how my love of football started. So a very kind, generous coach of my brother's team didn't see gender, didn't see anything other than a kid wanted to kick around and play the game. So for the rest of that season, I got dragged off to tennis. Right? I love tennis as well. I love all sports. I'm a sport nuffy, but the initial engagement and the initial experience helped form my love of the game. From that day on, as a 7-year-old, the game had its hooks into me. I'll talk about getting your hooks into players when they have that first experience. Boys, girls, doesn't matter. If you can help develop that love of the game at such an early age, they will stay with the game. Now, we know that not every single player that plays the game is going to be a Matilda or a Socceroo, and that doesn't matter as long as they are still 47 years later involved, if that's as a fan, if that's as a coach, an administrator, referee, whatever capacity, media, whatever it is, if they're paying their bucks going and supporting the game and turning up, but that can't happen unless you develop that love of the game. So in terms of where we come from, where we're going, you know, in nearly 50 years, women weren't allowed to play the game at all, right? So it's 50 years on since we've kind of come back into the fold. And the last 5 years, I'd say in particular, it has blown my mind. This tournament has blown my mind. This is my 6th World Cup, 5 women, 1 men's World Cup. This tournament has blown my mind. When you're in a stadium where Australia's not even playing, and there's 40,000 screaming football fans, men, women, children, boys, girls, every denomination you can think of. When you have 40,000 fans celebrating female athletes at the highest level, I go, wow. So yeah, 50 years has been a long time since we were allowed to play the game as women back in this country. But we've caught up a lot. And it's not to say that there's still not a lot of work to do, because the 50 years that we missed out on means that we still don't have parity. And as long as I have air in my lungs and I walk the earth, I will strive for the parity. So yes, we've done a lot to make up not being involved, but I would say it's incumbent upon every single one of us in the game who has any influence whatsoever to help develop that passion and get our hooks into kids at the earliest possible age so that they stay in the game for life.
I've got a question for you, Ray. How important is it then for girls to see women coaches in the community?
Well, I think it's extremely important. I think that not enough is probably made of the fact that every out of the last 5 World Cups, apart from one in 2011, that was won by the Japanese. Every World Cup's been won by a female coach. The last 5 Olympics is the same, won by a female coach. So much so, Football Australia felt that there was a need to actually address this on a much deeper level. And we recently, as part of the legacy, our legacy strategy, have released a white paper talking about 6 tactics. So we've used some great football language, 6 tactics to address that underrepresentation of female coaches in high performance. Because yes, we do have we've got a plethora of coaches at community level, but in high performance level, there still remains the old adage that I don't know any, or where will I find one? So we're actually going to try and make it a lot easier for people to find female coaches who are extremely well credentialed, well-travelled, well-experienced. In the back of the room there, Amy, that there's an awful lot of them out there, but to say we don't know where they are or we can't find them. So we've addressed that, and we've made a lot of suggestions and recommendations to those power brokers, to those decision makers in the game about how they can try to find them. So how important is it? I think it's extremely important, so that, as I said before, only 2% of our playing population will go on to become Matildas or Socceroos. So what do? If you've got that absolute love of the game, you're actually quite good at it. And how do we continue to increase representation? So from somebody who was the first and the one, the one woman in the room all the time at all your courses, etc., representation is really important, because having such a small representation, a small percentage, can actually become quite exhausting. And the collective, having more people, gives you opportunity to feel a little bit more solidarity, and young players can actually see that it's normalised. It doesn't actually matter, and as a male coach, female coach doesn't matter, but the more female coaches they see, the more that it will be normalised, and the more that you can actually bring a true diverse representation of coaching to the field.
Well said. Well said, thank you. So what's something that women's football needs right now? What do we need to do right now?
A sugar daddy. I mean, a serious investment of resources.
Well, or maybe a sugar mama, because there are Michelle Kang and Natalie Portman and some of the high profile actually women and male athletes, because a lot of athletes, now that they're earning really good money, and Serena Williams is doing this, they're actually investing their money in other sports clubs and sports enterprises to create a legacy for themselves, but also create opportunity. And a lot of the investment is specifically targeted at women's sport. I'm currently, as a side job, advising a group that's starting a new. It's an existing competition, but they want to move to a professionalized level for a women's rugby competition in the United States. And there's room there, but there's investment there. Maybe not the levels we see in football, because rugby's not as big, but we are seeing significant levels of investment, but that has to filter through the system as well. And you have to have those models like Angel FC, where you have the investment, and the model is based on community engagement. Or we had representatives here from FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, which is run by Right to Dream Foundation. So it's a foundation that creates opportunities that takes players potentially to the senior level to play for the club in Denmark, and then have an opportunity, if they succeed, to go on as several have in the men's and women's side, to play in Germany, England, and France. So there are a couple of different types of models that are out there, but we need to highlight those, promote those, celebrate those, and encourage additional investment. Because you're right, and a couple of other panels mentioned this, money does make a difference in what you can do.
Yeah, agree. And I'd say, just to add on to that, and I don't know which comes first, but the attention and respect that it deserves. So whether that's because we get the money to do that, or whether people pay attention, and then, yeah, I'm not sure which will come first, but yeah, definitely needs more attention than it's getting.
Laid on the parade again. What I want, the question is, what does women?
What does women's football need right now?
It needs 4 young women go out on the town, meet each other for the first time in 3 weeks, and I want them to spend 70% of the evening discussing sports and football. I don't think that exists. And you guys don't count. No.
That's a body to body.
No, because you're part of the, no, especially with the two of you. No. I'm talking about a lawyer, a doctor, whatever, university professor, whatever, for non-soccer based women who are, and go out. And my point is, again, back to the fandom, okay, that the reason the men's game, and of course it has 140 years of tradition for this, the men's game is carried by the Andy Markovits. The Andy Markovits of the world was a lousy player. The only reason I was sort of on a team in TV Shar Romania is because I owned the ball. So, but it's in fact on the consumer side that the verve of this really exists. And it's not that such women don't exist, but they don't exist yet in large masses. Should they? Maybe not. I mean, as I said in my earlier thing, I think it's outrageous that, a friend of mine can spend a weekend with me and I don't even find out that his girlfriend left him. Okay? My wife finds out. I mean, it's in some ways a very stultifying form of communication, but it's immensely rewarding. I mean, it's just so, and I think that's, so back to I would like to have, it would be a great study to find out how many of the 40,000 fans that are now, ecstatic about, which is a wonderful thing to see. What happens in 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever? How do they follow? What do they continue to discuss this? Are they worried about a particular player's form? She's declining. Okay? All of this, it's really thick description. Sports is a very involved culture and ever changing. That's what makes it so nice, and non-scripted. That's what I like it over my other passion, theater and opera. We don't know the end. Okay? And that gives it an immense one. So I would love for women to be sports speakers. Yeah, that's what I would love.
So I thought we might throw it over to the audience and see if there's any questions.
First question for Andy. Any experience being a super fan of Manchester?
I'm sorry. Yeah, or
I'll talk louder. I've experienced being a super fan of Sportchester up in that
Yes,
top
yes.
corner. And I almost had to, well, I have, because of the mental health issues it caused me, the team that I supported, I've had to ban myself from watching them because I'd go for a week or however long, stressing about the performance and how bad it was or whatever. And during the Women's World Cup, I've gone to almost every game in Sydney, and I've become one of these enthusiasts.
Yeah. A dilettante.
And I've absolutely loved it. And I've thought to myself, this is the way to support sport, because I actually enjoy it. I don't go away thinking like not being able to sleep that night because I'm thinking of someone I know is had such a bad game.
Yes.
The coach is doing such a bad job, or whatever it might be. I'm thinking.
What I talked about, affliction, addiction. You were formerly addicted and now you're not.
Addicted. And I've found that being like this, I actually walked away from the Colombia-Germany game thinking to myself, I didn't know the word for this, but I want to be one of these supporters from now on, and I'll travel the world supporting teams I honestly aren't really that keen on. Like I don't support Germany or I don't support Colombia, but I just love the environment and I didn't really care who won, and I was cheering for both teams. And it was just I guess the vibe and the enjoyment of being there. Do you think women's sport needs to go into this quadrant?
I see. First of all, of course, the word, you can't be a sportista because sportista is obviously, the title of my book is a pun, of course, on fashionista.
Okay.
So someone who is a fashionista, not only someone who loves fashion, but also knows fashion.
Yeah.
Okay, you really have to know it. Who knows the history of, okay. So that's a gender term, so let's go call you a sportisto or something. I'm totally impressed. I mean, I wish I could disengage like this.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's the hope that kills us, right?
But
It's the hope that kills us.
See, I would not, interestingly, I actually have complete admiration for you, but also in a certain way, a kind of contempt. Meaning, how can this guy who was in this amazing pantheon of sportistas, naming me, sort of actually exit? I'm envious. I would love to do it. I can't do it.
Self-preservation.
It's amazing. Well, I tell me how to do it. It doesn't work for me.
I got some of the data that usually, uses people online and, goes on social media or Facebook or Instagram, says bad things, but there were nights I was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, I need to write something bad about this person that just did something terrible and I didn't do it. I was felt, but then I thought, I'm going to stop because it's, I've got to get a better mindset. And it's been great. I've been 2 years.
Yeah.
Of not watching my team. I've had times when I'm sort of like, thought, I know they're playing this week, and I'm like, people are talking about it, I don't know about it.
Yeah, but you see, you don't matter because this was your male sports. For women, I would like to have, for it to really develop, a couple of you earlier. In other words, I want some women or more women to actually, again, go out in the evening, the girls' night out. And I want the evening to be at least, let's say, 40-50% of sports talk, not 5.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that means it's a support structure. They will really be involved. They will follow it. They do this, they debate, and it's the thick part of such a culture, which I think would be so for the women, I want you to really go back and really become, a fun. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, my parents love the sports space and do it there.
Yes.
We're much more collegiate anyway, right? So
I know there's a lot of ego in men's sport, and it's sort of like,
Because in men's sport, you can't help that you're from New South Wales. So no wonder you're distressed most of the time. But, in women's sport, it's like, well, I follow my top
Queensland
players.
mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say this, I have been like you. I've supported Aston Villa since I started watching football in 1979. The first time I went in the Holt End, Villa won 3-0, beat Elton John, owned Watford. I was hooked, and I've stayed with them. You know, and I did research in Melbourne when I was looking at the attempt to merge clubs. And even people who came from England said, I learned when I moved to Melbourne, I must have a footy team. And the second rule is I can never change my footy team, right? This is showing us in this World Cup. I went to the match in German garb. We met a bunch of Colombian supporters who said, oh, Deutschland brought me over. You know, we had a great time. It was camaraderie, men and women. It was wonderful. And then you go into the stadium and you see that atmosphere, and it was electric. I was not disappointed when Colombia won. It was a beautiful goal. The celebration was insane. People were calling home to Bogota, talking with family who were watching the game there. And for me, it was just infectious. Now, what I will say, we've got to work on is when I went to the opening match at the Olympic Stadium, I should have felt that Colombian atmosphere. We've got to do a little better ourselves. I thought in Melbourne the atmosphere was really good for the last match, but I think there is, James, this kind of infectiousness in women's football, of the delight around what's happening, what we're seeing, and you know, going back to what Ray was saying, this celebratory moment of, wow, we've gotten this far in our lifetime from the point of women kind of returning to being able to actually play, and girls being able to play, to where we are today with 40,000. I mean, the average, including the New Zealand matches in that horrific weather, is over 34,000 now per match, 3,000 more than in France. And by the end of the World Cup, that average is probably going to be closer to 40. That is unbelievable.
Can I just add to what I hope the women will not do if they got to the sportista level is the downside of it. The downside of it is the ugliness, is the racism, the fury, the Serbian nationalism. I mean, you know, when I went to the World Cup, the Women's World Cup in 2011, I followed the American team. I went from German city to German city. The first, second, third game, I just didn't quite understand why I felt different. I thought, what's going on here? And then I thought, hey, I'm taking the U-Bahn and I'm not worried about some right-wing guy smashing my face in. Or I'm not worried about some guy invoking a battle of 1815, or basically the whole notion of anger, which is part of fandom. And by the way, often seen by men as authentic fandom. Okay, so an American student who grew up in London told me that he will not go to Michigan games anymore. And I immediately knew why. He's a Chelsea fan. I said, oh, it's too meek. I said, absolutely, American fans are not real fans. It's too meek. They're cheering, whatever. There's no hatred. There's no showdown against Ohio State, meeting again, you know, their ultras against our ultras, which is, I think, part of the upper level, okay? A form of hostility, a form of anger, which I hope the women, and I think women are just saner and won't do this, but
Amen.
But Andy and I saw something very interesting the other day in the Canada-Australia game. I mean, so far, I've never seen a woman player actually go up to the referee and go like this. It's different behavior, okay? And for the first time, I think it was a Canadian player or Australian. Okay, all right. She actually went, and I thought to myself, whoa, there, you know.
She's French. They were speaking French, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's fascinating. So, you know, who knows if the game becomes much bigger with these crazy fans like the Andy Markovitses, okay, that in fact it may be that they're writhing on pain on the ground, they're contesting thing that they're fighting. Why not? And their fans would be. At the moment, it's just, you know, wonderful ecumenical, great feeling. German fans are embracing Colombian fans, whatever. Can you imagine this, a city or a United match against Liverpool? I mean, people are embracing or what?
We've got another question.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Katrina Fraser, University of Sydney, and the other question for Andrei and Louise. So you both are female leaders in sport, in football, in high performance sport. Louise, you mentioned that you work with coaches and how to support them, but also how to help them to keep them in that sport. Ray, you mentioned that Football Australia has a strategy called Six Tactics. How specifically increase the representation of female leaders in high performance sport? So can you tell us a little bit more about mental health challenges, but not necessarily the personal experience, but of other people who experience? Research tells us a lot about barriers that female coaches, female leaders experience in sport, but from your point of view, how do we support female coaches? How do we support their mental health? What do we need to stay in that space and actually make, I guess, a career?
Yeah, great question, because I think anyone, male or female, in like a role in that high performance kind of arena, you have to have thick skin, right? You have to actually know what to listen to, know what to ignore. But in doing that, you need to have, I think, perspective is one thing, really, really good perspective, a healthy perspective. To have a healthy perspective, you have to have good mental health. One of the ways to do that, I think, is to have some really, have a really good support structure set up. So that's family, that's trusted friends, good critical friends as well, that, can actually tap you on the shoulder when, potentially, you do have a challenge that you need to address. Having good critical friends is really important. But I think ultimately, I think part of being a leader is that you need to understand yourself. So you need to understand what your challenges are, what your triggers are, and how to manage them. Again, if you have a great critical friend that can help to highlight that for you when the red mist kind of is there, that that potentially you can't think clearly yourself. So having that, so you need to know yourself, understand yourself, you know what your challenges are, how to manage them, but also know what your strengths are and how to leverage them. And surrounding yourself with really smart people who can robustly, respectfully challenge you to be better is a key in that. So you have to not be afraid to have those really robust, respectful conversations, because that is what drives you and your team to be better. So that would be certainly an aspect of that. And as I said, having a really good support structure where you can, and a good perspective where you know where you need to turn off, go and have some time where you're not spending 75% of your time talking about football at dinner, and be really true to yourself in that. Authenticity, I think, is probably the most humbling thing that people can actually do, to be your authentic self, and to not actually try to be anyone else, but to be your authentic self. That's warts and all. That's who you are. And there's an old saying that around, that's an Oscar Wilde statement. It's not trying to be anyone else. Basically, just be yourself, because everyone else is already taken. And I think that that's a perspective that I carry through my work life and in my life away from football.
Okay. Let's start in that. I guess from my point of view, it's not so much in the high performance space. I've done some coaching in that space myself, but the coaches that I will be aiming to support and have supported over sort of the last 8 8 or so years, are more in the community space from either working in the grassroots or sort of that next phase up where the players are all wanting to be there, not just the parents maybe sending them off to those about the energy, but they've thought, yeah, I really like this, I'm going to spend a little bit more time doing it. So it's the coaches supporting different levels of players. And I guess it's, like Ray's just said, it's finding being yourself, so, and then allowing them to be themselves too. So if the coaches, they're all different, as players are all different, and people are all different, coaches are all different. Coaching is hard. I think that's the first thing you got to say. When I start working with coaches, it's going to be hard, but it's hopefully going to be worth everything. So everything you go through, you have the moments where you go, yep, that's why I'm doing it. And then just as you're about to question yourself again, you have the moments of, yep, that's why I'm doing it. And so I think but it has to be a team. So what I found the most valuable to me is creating a team. So if I relate this back to me being a leader, I don't see myself as a leader with a team below me. I go, I'm going to create a really good environment, or aim to create a really good environment with a team of coaches that are all there to help each other. And so I'll find coaches that are better than me in certain areas because I think they're going to help me. And so you find that it's the environment that you create. So I think if you get that right, and you can support coaches through the way that they feel supported, even if they've not got that constant, you can't be on the phone all day, every day to the coaches that need that support. But if they can create a team environment where they're helping each other, I think that's really key. So creating the environment where people, it's not just the leader helping the coaches, they all help each other. I think that's really important. I don't know if I've made that make sense, but you've got to have a team of people around everybody, not just one person as the leader.
Take one last question.
Well, whenever I think that Australia will host any World Cup at all, I think hosting the Women's World Cup, what I was hoping about this tournament, what I hope is that we're going to hope successfully, and I think we're going down that track. What I'm hoping is by us demonstrating that we're going to host a Women's World Cup, that will increase our chances to maybe hold the Men's World Cup. But what I'm concerned about is trying to get the Men's World Cup. Is Russia and Qatar, they got it by nothing mainly into this federation to get their vote. So is there going to be any changes so that we can genuinely bring that big in order to get it for the bids?
Well, I want to start by referring everybody, since she was crook and couldn't be here, to Benita Merciati's book, The FIFA Way, because what she details in that book is that Australia, in order to succeed, didn't do anything much different from Qatar or Russia. It was because they had to play the politics of FIFA. And so I think until we kind of understand the supplier and perhaps reform that in a sense, that there will remain challenges as to what is a society like ours prepared to do in order to achieve success. I also think I agree that it's a great aspiration, but it's a false equivalency to me. I think the Women's World Cup is an event in and of itself that is hugely successful, and I think it shows that Australia can continue to host major events despite what the Victorian government might think. But at the same time, I think celebrating this and then saying this is a Women's World Cup, what can we do out of this Women's World Cup to create a legacy for women and for our communities in the country? And then as that infrastructure develops, Australia certainly has the facilities, and then it becomes a question of how do you engage with those external politics, and what are you prepared to do in order to achieve that success? Because as we know, even on this platform, trying to get tickets for everybody at the conference to go to the France-Panama game, we had to say, you have to go download the FIFA ticketing app and you can get up to 9 or 10 tickets or whatever yourself. But you basically got to go on your own and not get this kind of sort of group together. When you go to the Men's World Cup, you have to buy it through the tour agencies, which are all licensed by FIFA. And you're staying at the international hotels who are owned by companies who are invested in this kind of success. And finally, I would say, you know, there are concerns about money coming in from places like Saudi Investment Fund, where Chelsea, and we have a great friend who's on the back of my jersey who plays for one of the Chelsea clubs. Chelsea just had to sell players to Saudi Arabia to avoid financial fair play. They sold it to the same company that owns 20% of Chelsea. So there's this cycle of money and sort of high level, I would almost say dirty politics that exists in men's football at the moment that I think needs to be kept separate. I'm for equality of opportunity, but I'm also for saying that women's football doesn't have to be compared to men's football in any way whatsoever for women's football to be successful. So that's my rant on that one.
Well, I'm not saying.
Yes.
My reaction is we're able to show that we're able to host this women's World Cup. We don't increase our chances to get the men's World Cup.
So what I will say is we have hosted 2 previous editions of Youth World Cups. 1981, I was a sort of 11-year-old, led the teams out on the banner. We had with the banner led them out onto the field at Brisbane's rectangular stadium. And 93, I think, half, that was our other one, right? The men. So we've done a, you know, obviously very modest exactly. But what I will say is this edition of hosting this Women's World Cup has obviously done us no harm. FIFA president just last night suggested that this is the best ever. So whether that's the one Samaranch moment of, it remains to be seen. But I would like to think that this has done us no harm, and certainly we have displayed that with the tournament not even being half over, that it's going to reach record. Stratospheric record that figures that we just never would have thought in even in our wildest dreams. Most fervent supporter, I think so. It's certainly a nice place to be in. Obviously, our winter hasn't been as bad as the other winters from some of the other countries. So our winter, I think it's 27 in Brisbane today. So that can't do us any harm either. And the infrastructure, as you said, in the lead up of another 9 years to go to the Brisbane Olympics, the infrastructure that will go in around the country to not just sporting facilities, but it's all the other stuff, right? The roads, the rail, the extra investment in hotel industry, etc. That's all going to, I think, bode quite well for anything that we do into the future.
I will agree with that. Yeah, I'll just close by saying I do want to thank Steve Georgakis for all of the organization on campus. I was doing the program remotely while I was in the States and briefly in the UK. So this takes a team, and Andy and James and several of the others, particularly here at the university, all of the people, Amy at Sydney Uni, Sport Fitness, Soccer Football Club, it takes a team to make this sort of thing happen. So I'm really appreciative of that, as well as everybody who's showed up and answered my emails to say, please come present, or in some cases, Harp's email saying, hey, we've got this great event on, come down and see it. And, for Andy and some of the others who've come a long distance, Sarah, from overseas, that's been exciting to have, so many people here, at the University of Sydney. And, this is a phenomenal time, for sport in Australia and for women's sport in Australia. Not only in football, but, because primarily of the success of our women swimmers, Australia won by far the most goals at the World Swimming Championships that have been going on, while we've all been obsessed with football. And it's been very exciting. And so it's a wonderful time, but there's a lot of work still to do. And with that last comment in mind, Andy Harper has a comment about you said those who were unattached this evening or wanted to watch.
Well, it's less a compliment. It's, by the way, congratulations to you, John. Can't speak for anyone else, but I just been that for the last 2 days. It's been fantastic.
100%.
Really outstanding, contributed to the people who travelled. I'm just going to offer this thank you because wish more people had come, but that's for the post-game wrap. In the meantime, it's just, we talked before, these have been 2 long days. An early start this morning on top, and still late in the piece, people are spewing stuff out, chewing on stuff. The energy this has created and the energy people have brought to deliver this bonhomie around this amazing spectacle called the World Cup and this huge future we have in women's football has just been fantastic. This is not supposed to be a closing address, by the way. I've got the opportunity to thank people for putting this together and bringing this to life. John, Steve and I had coffee just across the oval there saying, let's do this. And how you brought us to doing this was incredible. So fantastic to really. Now, comments. Those who are at a loose end this evening, Professor Markovits and I, he doesn't know this yet, we're going to the Marlborough Hotel, which is on the corner of King Street and Whiston Road. The uninitiated, it's a few minutes walk diagonally through the campus, and you're there. And they're going to have, well, I've asked for the Brazil, surprise, Jamaica game on off the sport. It's on. We're going, if you're at a loose end, feel free to join us. If not, we're going on.
Thanks, Andy. Final thing, some of the sessions are already up. It's under my YouTube channel at the moment, but they're labeled the Business and Development of Women's Football Conference. And by tomorrow, I hope to have all of the sessions that we recorded available online. You can watch, share, so that we can have a record of this. Andy, maybe we'll have a lot more virtual attendees as well. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Hello, yes, yeah, how are you? Well, yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all right.
No, it's very good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ah, right, yeah, 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 yeah. 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 Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you. I think more, I really see more and it's why.
Around, control the bar.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Anyway, it's, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never.
Yeah, and I'm standing the bus. Yes, I
Come back and do the questions.